Mass deportations have been a very contentious topic between both political parties. In fact, not just deportations, but the very concept of illegal immigration. As it stands, the left is pro-illegal immigration, and the right is anti-illegal immigration. The reason I said as it stands is because, for some reason, both political parties, although I've seen a tad bit more on the left, have flip-flopped their stances on illegal immigration throughout history. Take Obama, for example.
Even as we are a nation of immigrants, we're also a nation of laws. Undocumented workers broke our immigration laws, and I believe that they must be held accountable, especially those who may be dangerous. That's why over the past 6 years, deportations of criminals are up 80%. And that's why we're going to keep focusing enforcement resources on actual threats to our security. Felons, not families. Criminals, not children.
You sure about that? You sure about that? You sure about that?
And that was only a decade ago. Or take Bernie Sanders, for example, who went as far as to say that pro-illegal immigration was a right ideology.
Open borders?
Open borders.
That's a Koch brothers proposal. The
Really?
idea, of course, I mean, that's a right-wing proposal which says essentially there is no United States.
But
That
it would,
anybody
it
can-
would make a
excuse
lot
me.
of the global poor richer, wouldn't it?
And it'd make everybody in America poor. Then you're doing away with the concept of a nation state. And I don't think there's any country in the world which believes in that. What right-wing people in this country would love is an open border policy. Bring in all kinds of people who work for $2 or $3 an hour. That would be great for them.
Now, granted, perhaps the right didn't show that much interest in illegal immigration at the time, and sometimes maybe they didn't even run on it. However, this is mainly because it has always been more of a bipartisan policy that has been advocated by both sides of the political spectrum. Needless to say, times have changed. Now, the real question is, why? Why has the left shifted their stance on illegal immigration, and exactly when did this start happening? But above all else, is anti-immigration and mass deportations actually good for America? First, before I begin elaborating why mass deportations are good, let's take a deep dive into the Democrat mind. What has changed throughout the years that has made them stray from a bipartisan policy, aka illegal immigration? If we go all the way back to the 1980s and 1990s, the Reagan and Clinton era, you'd see that both political parties were heavy advocates for a strong border and anti-illegal immigration. For instance, Reagan's Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986 had bipartisan backing. It combined a pathway to citizenship, amnesty for many illegal immigrants with new penalties for employers hiring them. And compared to now, this seems to be quite a overly compassionate policy that was proposed by a prominent Republican such as Reagan. Now let's ask Bill Clinton. He not only supported border control, but also increased funding for Border Patrol and signed laws like the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996, which toughened enforcement and expedited deportations, and many mainstream Democrats supported these measures. Following this, let's look at what Bush did. Although he was always anti-immigration, the most notable act that he signed was the 2006 Secure Fence Act. This had overwhelming support from many Democrats, including, at the time, Senator Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Joe Biden. This law funded hundreds of miles of fencing along the southern border, practically a branch of what Trump envisioned the wall being, and yet it was overwhelmingly supported by both political parties. This is speculation, and granted, I don't really have proof to back this up, but if Trump decided to pass this same exact act today, would it still garner the support of mainstream Democrats? Most likely, probably fucking not. Now let's look at our deportation king, Barack Hussein Adolf Obama. Sorry, whenever I see Obama's name, I'm forced to read it in a Trump voice. While President Obama deported more people than any other previous president, he also introduced a thing called the DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Basically, for eligible people, it delayed deportations for 2 years, which was also renewable, grants a work permit but does not provide citizenship. This is the moment that Republicans grew a tad bit more vocal in opposing what they framed as amnesty policies, while Democrats began increasingly emphasizing compassion and humanitarian considerations, which is just a bit counterintuitive considering that over half of the 3 million people Obama deported were non-violent criminals with no criminal record at all, and the other half only had minor offenses, such as driving without a license, illegal entry, re-entry, drug possession, or a minor misdemeanor. So although Obama made a few lenient policies for young illegal immigrants, which in all fairness, I don't really find that big of an issue compared to other problematic policies, he was still absolutely ruthless, in some ways more than Trump ever was. In fact, many Republicans now dream of getting the same results as Obama did in the past. And yet I guarantee you, many people on the left didn't know the details of Obama's deportations. It's out of sight, out of mind. If the news doesn't talk about it, if your own president doesn't really talk about it, then practically it doesn't exist. It's not happening. But then something changed. A well-known person entered the political landscape on June 16th, 2015, exactly 1 decade ago.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am officially running for President of the United States. We need somebody that literally will take this country and make it great again.
However, the unexpected happened. It had changed the whole political landscape forever.
Clinton leading in Florida, Clinton leading in North Carolina, Clinton leading in Ohio, Clinton leading in Nevada. I could go on and on and on.
I continue to believe Mr. Trump will not be president.
And so, right now, Mr. Trump, to answer your call for political honesty, I just want to say, you're not going to be president, all right? It's been fun. It's been great. I love you. But come on, buddy.
We have a major projection right now. Donald Trump will take Ohio. That CNN projects Donald Trump will carry the state of Florida. Huge win for Donald Trump. Donald Trump, we project, will win in Kentucky, in Indiana, with its 11 electoral votes. West Virginia, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Mississippi.
This was the catalyst, in my opinion, for the political shift regarding illegal immigration. Trump promised to build a physical wall along the US-Mexico border to stop illegal immigration, and by the end of his term, around 450 miles of barriers were constructed or reinforced, most replacing old fencing. The tension surrounding this topic became more noticeable. People began forming a direct opposition to Trump's policies, sometimes not even thinking whether their own policies would benefit their country, but more or less simply out of spite. In better words, whatever Trump does, we do the opposite. He's a bad person, therefore everything he does is what we shouldn't do. As the saying goes, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. That sentiment only strengthened when Trump imposed arguably his most controversial immigration policy yet. In April 2018, the Trump administration launched the zero-tolerance policy, which criminally prosecuted all adults who crossed the border illegally, even if they were seeking asylum or traveling with children. This meant that there were massive family separations. Over 5,500 kids were separated from their families, a little over double that of Obama's, which would actually be surprising for many to find out. Yes, Obama actually did separate children as well. It's also inevitable once you're deporting millions of illegal immigrants. But in all fairness, the difference was that Trump was very vocal about it, and it was an actual existing policy. And Obama's number includes his whole term, while Trump was only in the matter of a couple of months, until the zero-tolerance policy was officially removed in June 2018 due to the backlash and humanitarian concerns. In my opinion, I understand what Trump wanted to do. He wanted to create a deterrent, to instill fear in them, so they wouldn't even think about crossing the border alone, and especially with a child. However, I don't think it was the right call, especially when it was heavily mismanaged. The HHS admitted it didn't have tracking systems in place to link children with parents once they were in separate facilities. Therefore, it would be very difficult to unite them after their guardians were deported. Not only that, but the Government Accountability Office found that record keeping was inconsistent and often manual, with no centralized database to match families. Listen, I'll be quite blunt with you. I do support securing our border and making sure people come in legally, but I'm not a blind-sighted retard. This was heavily mismanaged. They were not prepared at all. It required more resources, personnel, and there were numerous better ways to approach this in order to stop illegal immigration. As the great Tom Holman said,
"Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?"
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
Suffice to say, this momentary fuck-up by the Trump administration only made the opposition stronger. They started taking more radical pro-immigration policies. For example, when Biden won the 2020 election, he proposed a legal pathway to citizenship for Dreamers, TPS holders, farm workers, and illegal immigrants, even though they freaking crossed illegally. He restored the DACA protections that Trump had previously removed, which was Obama's old policy for young illegal immigrants, as I mentioned earlier. He raised refugee admissions caps after initially hesitating, ended the Remain in Mexico policy, though later forced to start parts of it due to some court orders. And above all else, he was just way less strict on the southern border, which caused a grand total of 9 million illegal immigrants to come into the country during his 4-year term, the highest of any president in history. For comparison, during Trump's first term between 2017 and 2021, he let in 2 million illegal immigrants, even though he was kind of strict, which just goes to show you how big of a problem this actually is. Or is it a problem? The whole duration of this video, I was reciting what exactly changed in the Democrat Party for illegal immigration and the cause for it, which, in short, was Trump becoming president and his anti-immigration policies causing the Democrat Party to take a more contrarian stance. Now, let me tell you why illegal immigration is bad for our country, just how exploitative it is, and how mass deportations could potentially solve a lot of our problems and benefit the U.S. far more than people are letting on. There are 3 main arguments that pro-illegal immigration people often say. They pay a massive amount of taxes to our country, so if we simply deport them, then our whole economy would collapse. They do jobs that no American wants to do. We can't replace them because they're the backbone of our economy. We have a humanitarian and moral obligation to let them in our country. Let's start with the first one. Now, I've seen this claim numerous amount of times, and I can't help but think it's a bit misleading. Because a common person will assume they mean paying taxes in the traditional sense, like annual federal income tax. But actually, illegal immigrants don't pay that. Instead, they pay sales tax whenever they buy something, property tax, sometimes payroll tax if they're using a fake SSN number, but they can't receive any benefits from it. In totality, however, it's projected that illegal immigrants pay over $90 to $100 billion in taxes every year. And at first glance, that sounds great. They're contributing a massive amount of money to the economy. So how can I stand here and say that they don't matter and that we're better off without them? Well, let me ask a simple question. How much do you think our government spends per year on subsidies for illegal immigrants, such as food, school, housing, healthcare, and etc.? Well, it certainly isn't $100 billion. It's far more. Over $180 billion is what we spend per year subsidizing illegal immigrants, meaning that we are effectively losing upwards of $80 million every single year by allowing them in our country and endlessly subsidizing them. Moreover, that is $180 billion that could go to subsidizing our citizens to make their lives better, more affordable, more comfortable, if we simply reallocated what we support and what we give to illegal immigrants. That alone should be a compelling enough argument, but I know somebody's going to say, well, it's going to cost a lot more to deport them. Actually, no. It costs roughly $10,000 to deport one illegal immigrant, and we currently have 11 million illegal immigrants in the country. So, doing some quick math, it would take only $110 billion to deport every single illegal immigrant in the country. Well, that's weird. We're giving them $180 billion every single year, meaning that if we decided to use that subsidy money to deport them for once, we would still have $70 billion left over to give to our citizens. We could solve the problem permanently, indefinitely, and still have money left over that same exact year. Now, obviously, I don't think we should deport every single legal immigrant in 1 year. Of course not, that would be retarded. I think if we were to do it, it should be spread across multiple years, so it doesn't overwhelm the government and doesn't shock the economy due to the sudden labor shortage, which I will address later. And while we're at it, because we have $70 billion left over, we can use that to continuously secure our border and hire more people to streamline the immigration process. Suffice to say, in terms of just deporting every single illegal immigrant, we would actually be saving money, not losing. Of course, I wouldn't be ignorant to ignore one major flaw with this plan, or at least they say it's a flaw. They do jobs that no American wants to do, and deporting them would mean an economic collapse. Out of every single argument that I see pro-illegal immigration people use, this is the old reliable. If you're losing an argument, if you don't have statistics to back up your data, insist that your opponent's comfort is made by the very people he advocates against. This tactic throws your opponent into a very difficult position. If they double down, then they will be labeled as willfully ignorant, somebody who doesn't value their privileges. This is what I like to call a moral superiority argument. It aims to make the other person look bad. Therefore, whatever they say next is irrelevant and doesn't matter, even if it's valid or not. People often use this tactic when they throw around racists, sexists, and etc. They want to discredit your very existence so they don't have to listen to any argument you have to say. But fine, I'm not going to bitch about the debate tactics anymore. Of the 11 million illegal immigrants in our country, sources estimate that around 7 to 8 million are working. So let's just say we removed all of them, gradually of course, kept our border safe. Would the economy dip? The answer is yes. At least in the short term. But is that a valid reason to not pursue a policy? If you agree or disagree with the decision simply because it may have negative ramifications for the economy, well, then when Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, that too must have been a bad decision by that logic. You see, the whole Southern economy collapsed because of that decision. In 1825, the US only had around 25 to 30 million citizens, and at the time, there were a staggering 4 million slaves, meaning they comprised over 15% of the whole entire labor force. Now, illegal immigrants are 5% of the labor force, and arguably, I'm just gonna go on a limb here, slaves were working under far worse conditions and long hours. The plantation businesses relied on them far more. The whole Southern economy relied them far more. So yes, removing them did cause insane economic damages. Slavery was the foundation of the Southern agriculture-based economy, especially cotton, which made up 50% of the U.S. exports pre-Civil War. Many plantations couldn't function profitably without free labor, causing them to literally collapse. In terms of pure numbers, the decision back then caused way more harm to the economy than deporting every single illegal immigrant in the country ever will. And have you noticed something? The arguments that many people use today seem to be very similar to those plantation workers. Who's gonna pick our crops? Who's gonna do my backyard? You're telling me I'm gonna have to pay an actual maid now? Why are people so obsessed with exploiting illegal immigrants? Do you honestly think that Americans wouldn't do these labor-intensive jobs? They would. The problem is that a lot of these exploitative businesses would rather pay a fourth of the price and save money than actually give a fair wage to citizens. Because unfortunately, citizens have the law protecting them against slave labor. Why do people continuously support these exploitative businesses? In fact, why is our government not punishing them? This is not even a left or right issue. I've seen this on both sides. The left is all for exploitative labor because obviously it benefits them. But they hide under the argument that, well, it's better than the country they came from, which is the most insensitive and cold argument I have ever heard. Hey, this guy just escaped North Korea. Okay, now let's put him in a factory and make him work 13 hours a day because that's still better than how he was being treated back in his home country. Oh, I'm so sympathetic. I am so worried about him. Get the fuck out of here. You want cheap labor, just say how it is. And then you have people on the right who say they do care, but they don't do shit about it. In some cases, that pisses me off even more because it lifts my hopes up only to be crushed. Again, Bernie Sanders said it right back in the day.
Open borders.
Open
borders. That's a Koch brothers proposal. The idea, of course, I mean, that's a right-wing proposal which says essentially there is no United States.
But
it
would make a lot of global poor richer, wouldn't it?
And it'd make everybody in America poor. Then you're doing away with the concept of a nation state.
Man, I wonder where Bernie went. Love to have him back, but maybe the government killed him and replaced him with a reptilian wearing his skin. Both sides have mutually benefited from exploitative cheap labor. They'll continue doing nothing about it because they get more money. Again, this was the same exact arguments that people made back in Abraham Lincoln's time. This is going to cause an economic crash. Who's going to pick our crops? You're telling me we're going to be required to pay a wage? And look how the economy was after this badass, handsome man who didn't give a fuck freed the slaves. Although there was a crash at first, businesses were finally forced to pay wages to citizens, meaning the government got more taxes from them, and the economy rebounded stronger than ever before. If he could do it under way more intense conditions, again, slaves comprise over 15% of the labor force, then trust me, we'll be able to do it too. These illegal immigration advocates don't care about the economy. They don't care about these people's well-being. They're just doing it for political brownie points and because they benefit from exploitative cheap labor. They don't care for spending $180 billion in non-citizens. They don't care about the middle class, because if they did, they would be against this. This is not a matter of opinion. These are simple statistics, common sense, past examples of finally saying no to exploitative labor and how it could actually benefit us long term if we decided to implement them. I'm not going to even get into the third argument about the morality of anti-immigration because it's quite evident that these people don't care about morals. If they did, they'd be advocating fair wages for illegal immigrants. The US should be prioritizing its own citizens. It's the same way as this. Would you rather help your best friend who has stood by your side when he's having financial struggles? Or the homeless man across the street that probably does drugs? I sure hope you'd say your friend. It's simple common sense. The problem is, the US decided that they want to give the money to the drugged up homeless man across the street instead of their friends, actual American citizens. How is that fair? That goes against every fiber of common sense. And although I could stop right here, I don't really need to make any other points on why illegal immigration is bad. But let's talk about the US Census. It's a nationwide count of every person living in the country, conducted every 10 years. It includes citizens, legal residents, and undocumented immigrants. The data is used to determine how many seats each state gets in the House of Representatives and how many electoral votes they have in the presidential elections. It also helps decide how many billions in federal funding are distributed. Effectively, that means illegal immigrants are voting indirectly by simply living in that state. Do you honestly think that's fair? Anyway, I'm tired. But here's a quick summary of everything we learned today. Number one, the left switched their stance on illegal immigration, mainly to become oppositional to Trump. Number two, although illegal immigrants give quite a lot to the economy, we give them far more in subsidies. Number three, the fear-mongering logic that if we deport them, it'll cause an economic collapse is not a good enough reason to not pursue it, since Abraham Lincoln was successful, even though the situation was far worse back then, with slaves comprising 15% of the labor force. And also, the argument that Americans won't do the jobs is very inaccurate. They just need to be paid a frickin' fair wage and not exploited. It's not that hard. That excuse was the same language that people used back in the day to justify continuous slave labor. Number four, by allowing illegal immigrants to the country, they are skewing the electoral college point system, which gives unfair results in elections. Glad I could finally get that off my chest.